Добрый день, добрый
Good
вечер,
afternoon,
уважаемые
good
участники
evening, dear
третьего
participants of the
международного
third
всемирного форума
Northern
по
Sustainable
устойчивому
Development
развитию.
Forum.
Я хотел бы
I
сегодня
would like
приветствовать
to
всех
welcome
вас
today
на
all
нашем
of
главном
you
мероприятии
at
форума,
our
пленарном
important
заседании,
main event, the Plenary Session,
посвященном изменению
dedicated
климата и
to
реакции
climate change
многолетней
and
мерзлоты.
permafrost
Прошу не
response.
удивляться, что вы видите
Please
совершенно
do
другого
not
модератора
be
сегодня.
surprised that you
Конечно,
see a
Арктика и
different
Северный
moderator
суровый
today.
край,
Of
суровые
course, the
края,
Arctic and the
они
North
могут
are a
вносить
harsh
любые
place, and
изменения
they
в график
can
наших
result in many
действий.
different
Как бы мы
changes,
не хотели все сделать в лучшем виде, к
even
сожалению,
though
пару
we
рейсов
might
из
want
Москвы
it
были
differently.
задержаны, и
Unfortunately,
модератор
several flights
Виктория
from
Кладиева
Moscow
и
were
Стас
delayed,
сейчас в
and our
воздухе.
moderator
Так
that we
что
wanted, Victoria
сегодняшнее пленарное
Kladieva, is
заседание
still
буду
in
вести
flight
я,
at the moment.
Василий Владимир
That is why
Николаевич,
today I will be
исполнитель
moderating this
форума.
session.
Я бы
Vladimir
хотел
Nikolaev.
представить всем вам
And I would like
наших
to
уважаемых
introduce
спикеров.
our speakers
Очное
today.
участие
Today
в
here
пленарном
at the
заседании
studio we
принимает
have
Айсен
Aysen Nikolaev,
глава
head of
Республики
the Sakha Republic,
Якутия.
Yakutia.
Тоехиса Кодзуки,
Toyohisa
чрезвычайный
Kodzuki,
посол
Ambassador
Японии в
Extraordinary
Российской
and Plenipotentiary of Japan to the Russian Federation.
Валерий Анатольевич Крюков,
Валерий Крюков,
академик Российской академии наук,
academician
директор
of the
Института
Russian
экономики
Academy
и
of
организации
Sciences,
промышленного
director of the
производства
Institute of
Сибирского
Economics and Industrial
отделения Российской
Engineering,
академии
Siberian
наук.
branch of the Russian Academy of
Паоло
Sciences.
Вентурини,
Paolo
итальянский
Venturini,
спортсмен-экстремал.
Italian ultramarathon runner.
Михаил Николаевич
Михаил
Железняк,
Железняк,
действительный член Академии наук Республики Саха-Якутия,
member of the Academy of Sciences of
Института
Sakha-Yakutia,
имени Мельникова,
director
Сибирского
of
отделения.
Melnikov Permafrost Institute.
Также онлайн
And we
участие
also have our online speakers,
Николай Викторович
including
Корчунов,
Nikolai Korchunov,
председатель комитета
Ambassador at
статусов
large
лиц
for the Arctic
Политического
Cooperation
совета,
at the
посол
Ministry
по
of Foreign
особым
Affairs of the
поручениям
Russian
Министерства
Federation,
иностранных дел
Chairman
Российской
of the Senior
Федерации.
Officials Committee of the Arctic Council,
Николай Михайлович
Николай
Харитонов,
Харитонов,
председатель комитета
Chair
Государственной
of the
Думы
Russian
Российской
Federation
Федерации
State Duma
по
Committee
региональной
on
политике
Regional
и проблемам
Policy and
Севера и
Problems of the
Дальнего
North
Востока.
and the Far East.
Виталий Евгеньевич
Vitaly
Симоненко,
Simonenko,
вице-президент
Vice President
корпорации
of the
развития
Corporation for the
Дальнего
Development
Востока
of the
и
Far
Арктики.
East and the Arctic.
Григорий
Григорий
Петрович
Летков,
Летков, член
member
комитета
of the
Совета
Federation
Федерации по
Council
федеративному
Committee on
устройству,
Federal Structure,
региональной
Regional
политике,
Policy,
местному самоуправлению
Local
и делам
Government,
Севера.
and Northern
Я должен
Affairs.
отметить, что
And I
Григорий
want to
Петрович
say
сейчас
that
тоже
Grigory
находится
Letkov
в
is
воздухе.
still in
Он
flight
летит
at the
в
moment.
Арктику,
He
насколько
is
я
flying
помню, в
to the
Салехард.
Arctic,
И
to
я очень
Salehard,
надеюсь, что к
and I
времени
hope
своего
very
выступления
much
он сможет
that
присоединиться
he
к
will
нам.
be able to join us
Губернатор
shortly.
Лапландии,
Governor
председатель Северного
of
форума,
Lapland,
господин Мика
Chair
Рипи.
of the Northern Forum, Mika Ripi.
Китайский климатолог, экс-глава
Our
китайского
friend from
метеорологического
China,
управления,
Chinese
господин
glaciologist
Синь
and climate
Дахэ.
scientist Xin Dahe.
Вот такой у нас
So
авторитетный
this is
список
our
спикеров
list
сегодняшнего
of
пленарного
speakers
заседания.
for today's
Я
plenary
уверен,
session,
что мы
and
услышим
I am
очень
confident
интересные
that we will
выступления,
hear very
задающие
interesting
тон
speeches
на
today
ближайшие
that will
несколько
set
лет
the
в рамках
agenda
российского
for the next
председательства в Арктическом совете.
few years
Напоминаю, что сегодня
of
второй день
the
нашей работы
Russian chairmanship at the Arctic Council. Today is the second day of this Northern Forum for Sustainable Development,
проводим уже третий раз.
and within this big project, Russian and international experts discuss issues of climate change, principal environmental issues of modernity, new Arctic strategy, development of human capital, and other topics for the development of northern territories. And of course, we think that Yakutia is one of the regions of Russia that feels the climate change the most in Russia. In the last 50 years, the average change of global temperatures was about 1 degree, while in Yakutia this change was 2 to 3 degrees. So how this affects the economy of the Republic, and what kind of recommendations do we need for developing our efforts for changing climate and so on? And I would like to ask the head of our republic, Aysen Nikolaev, to speak about that.
Добрый вечер, уважаемые дамы и господа,
Good evening,
дорогие
dear
друзья.
ladies and
Рад
gentlemen,
приветствовать
dear
вас всех
friends.
на
I'm very
третьем
happy to
Северном
welcome
форуме
you
по
at the third Northern
Прежде всего от
Sustainable
имени
Development Forum,
руководства
and on behalf of the government of the Republic and
поблагодарить
on behalf
и
of
выразить
myself, I
благодарность
would like
за
to
участие
express
всем
my
нашим
gratitude to
партнерам,
you
представителям
for your
государственной
participation,
власти
to
Российской
all our
Федерации,
partners,
власти
to the
регионов,
representatives
ведущих
of
международных
the state
научно-образовательных
of
и исследовательских
Russia,
организаций,
the
крупнейших
researchers and
промышленных компаний
scientists,
и институтов развития.
representatives of
Я
companies
очень высоко ценю
and
стремление
development
каждого из
institutes.
вас внести свой
And
личный
I
вклад
think
в
that
решение важных
your
вопросов
efforts to contribute personally to the development of the North and the Arctic is very good, especially considering all these limitations that we face due to the global pandemic. And this period, of course, is not easy, but for many of us, this is a time of solidarity and partnership. And joining together all our efforts, we can overcome these challenges. And that is why it is very important for us to continue our dialogue, to exchange, to share our information, to our experience, our ideas on such forums as this one. And very recently, the pressing issues of today, such as the issue of the consequences of pandemics, seemed like the ones for the distant future. For like many decades, scientists of the world were talking about the challenges that we will face due to climate change. However, the climatic crisis, if it didn't exist completely, well, it wasn't really on the agenda of many different countries. And as a result, climate change and degradation of permafrost, this is the issue that is unfortunately standing before us right now. And many of these changes that we see today are unprecedented, maybe like for thousands of years or maybe hundreds of thousands of years. And the most sensitive to these issues region in the world is the Arctic, which is being influenced much more than other parts of our world. And we are taking part, quite a large part of the Russian Arctic. The Yakutian Arctic is 1,600,000 square kilometers, and that is why the role of Yakutia in the formation of global climate is very high, actually, as it is territory, because our territory is a huge environmental preserve and climatic regulators of the whole planet. And for Yakutia, Yakutia has about 30% of all the untouched nature of Russia. And globally, Yakutia has the most important environmental functions of global significance. And Yakutia is a kind of a projection of the global natural changes and feels them quite acutely. And of course, a big challenge for all of us, for our Yakutians, was the forest fires of this year. They were due to the hottest and driest weather that we had ever since monitoring began in the 19th century. And we now can think that the danger of such cataclysms in the future, well, it can happen again. And recently, UN Interdisciplinary Committee of Experts says that Arctic is warming twice as fast as any other parts of the world. And this will lead to the speeding up of thawing of permafrost. And even if the situation is not as dramatic in the future as the climatologists say, these processes will still lead to cardinal changes in human life in the Arctic. The challenges are the thawing of permafrost, and this will also lead to high emissions of trapped carbon, methane, and so on. There are going to be many more landslides, and the trees are going to lose their soil, and so on. And this will endanger the life of many millions of people in the Arctic. And for many tens of thousands of Sakha people, this is also not good. And also for the indigenous people of the north, who for thousands of years have been living in these lands. And when we discuss possible solutions, there are possibilities of very different solutions to this idea, to this problem, such as maybe like stopping all the industrial development in the region. And some say that maybe the global climate change is not real, or it's like exaggerated too much. But for us, this is not true. This is not just a discussion for us. They are standing before us when we are trying to make any decisions, be it cultural decisions, economic decisions, or any other decisions. Yakutia is one of the world leaders for raw natural resources, and this is the backbone for the development of Yakutia in our country. That is why we need to combating these changes. And we hope that before the end of the year, a national system of monitoring of the state of permafrost will start on the order of Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, and there will be new regional systems on the basis of existing systems. And of course, our scientific educational center, North for Sustainable Development, should also be included in this work. And the development of large-scale projects for nature conservation in Russia has significance due to the chairmanship of Russia in the Arctic Council. And in 2023, there is going to be a global summit here in Yakutsk on the issue of climate change. And the main issue can also be said already, which is the permafrost. And the danger to these permafrost systems requires activization of interregional and international cooperation to keep the balance. At present, the issues of climate change concerning the permafrost change are not really in the international agenda and documents. That is why the global summit in Yakutsk is going to be a perfect, good step for combating the degradation of permafrost. Dear colleagues and friends, I invite you all to take an active participation for the preparation of this global summit and to contribute to the resolution of all the issues that are facing us around the world. And it is very important for our Northern Sustainable Development Forum to continue to promote and raise awareness of these issues. And we hope that in the coming years, this forum will become a good starting point for the cooperation of everyone. And I wish you all cooperation and successful work at our forum.
Спасибо большое, Арсений Сергеевич. Да, абсолютно верно. Вы подметили, что лет 10 тому назад вопросам изменения климата уделялось практически очень слабое внимание. Мы в Северном форуме помним, когда мы проводили саммит по изменению климата
of the governments, and then in 24 we talked about the climate change here in Yakutsk. People talked what are these real changes, like a couple of degrees. But now we have much better understanding of the processes which are going in the Arctic, and we are happy to hear that the Sakha Republic Yakutia is showing its leadership again, initiating the new summit on climate change and permafrost. And of course, all members of the Northern Forum are ready to support this initiative. Last May, Russia took the chairmanship in the Arctic Council, and the Arctic Council agenda covers a wide range of issues: economy and environment. These are two major tasks which determine the quality of life in the Arctic. During the previous chairmanship of Russia in the Arctic Council in 2004-06, over 70 large-scale projects were implemented. And what will be the agenda for 2021-23? So who can tell us better about all these issues but Nikolai Korchunov, chairman of the Senior Officials Committee of the Arctic Council and ambassador at large for the Arctic cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, dear Mr. Nikolaev, dear colleagues. I'm glad that the third Sustainable Development Forum is taking place. Indeed, this is a real platform for the comprehensive discussion of the issues of the Arctic, and the Arctic development is our main topic, our priority during Russia's chairmanship in the Arctic Council. So we are going to focus on social and economic development, on improved living conditions of people in the Arctic, of indigenous people, to protection of environment, to maintaining biodiversity and maintaining sustainable economic and social development, various climate issues and adaptation to climate changes. Permafrost degradation will be also our priority, which is going to run through a number of activities, and the Permafrost Summit will crown these measures, and it will be held, the event which is initiated by the head of the Republic, Mr. Nikolaev. So we would also to note that the implementation of effective and comprehensive strategies for sustainable development permit the northern regions, without any losses and damages, get adapted and integrated into internal and external economic processes to improve the living conditions of the people in the Arctic and the indigenous people, to protect the environment and natural resources under the conditions of the changing climate. So that's why we consider the Northern Forum as a key platform for discussing and promoting and implementing the projects of the working groups of the Arctic Council on sustainable development, and for the brainstorm for new promising ideas and initiating project proposals. Also, we welcome the prospects that the North is witnessing the appearance of social institutions, which will enhance our efforts in this direction. So I'm glad that the indigenous agenda is taking a special place during the work of the forum. It's very important in the context of the next 10 years of the indigenous languages proclaimed by the UNESCO, by the UN. So I am wishing all the participants of the forum most interesting discussions and their fruitful implementation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Korchunov, and thank you for your continuous support of the Northern Forum. I'm very glad that the Northern Forum is becoming a real partner of the Arctic Council as an observer, and we have received an invitation to become co-organizer or operator of a number of Arctic Council events like the Resilience Forum and the Energy Summit in 2023 and a number of other events. So maintaining multifaceted cooperation and the open dialogue in the region is one of the priorities of our country, and the Northern Sustainable Development Forum is one of the channels for working out joint practical solutions. So this platform was also designed to involve more Asian countries, which are also observers in the Arctic Council. So the Northern Forum is an observer as a non-profit organization, but here we see distinguished Mr. Toyoshiro Kozuki, Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary of Japan to the Russian Federation, and he is going to share the Japan's views on the Arctic cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished Mr. Nikolaev, the climate change has become a challenge for the entire world. And the Forum on International Cooperation these days in this republic is a very timely event. Because your republic is located in this on permafrost, and it's very relevant for your republic. I'm honored to speak at this forum, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. As the moderator mentioned, Japan is an observer in the Arctic Council, and it also contributes into the protecting and preserving the environment there, and we monitor the climate change. And the Russia's chairmanship this and next year for the next 2 years is a very important event. And this event in the Sahara Republic has a great significance for the humankind. So I sincerely wish the success for the success of the next summit in 2023. I would like to draw your attention to what is going on between Japan and Russia. So how this cooperation, Japanese-Russian cooperation, developing. In the frame of the world cooperation, Japan proclaimed his carbon neutral policy. And to do so, we have developed the green growth strategy, and we are taking steps to implement this. Russia is also taking serious measures to protect the permafrost, which due to the climate change. Recently, the Eastern Economic Forum was held in Vladivostok, and the head of the republic was there, and I was also present there. And President Putin drew everyone's attention to the green economy, and he also emphasized that there is the possibility in cooperation in terms of green hydrogen is possible with foreign partners, and he also mentioned Japan in particular. So the Russian party, there is joint intention from the both countries. Japan has companies with most innovative technologies of producing and transporting hydrogen and ammiac, and also we have some solutions for underground burial of byproducts like carbon dioxide capture and storage, which is so we have this carbon dioxide catchment and storage technology. So the Japanese technologists have mastered this technology. On the other hand, Russia has rich natural resources. They have resources for producing of hydrogen. So if we combine our advantages, then the carbon-free production of hydrogen and ammonia will be possible. So the second possibility is the hydrogen export to Japan and other Asian countries. So, for example, the demand, the Japanese demand for hydrogen and ammonia by 2030 will be 3 million tons by the year 2030 of ammonia and hydrogen. These are big figures, and Russia has the potential to produce these amounts, so this could be mutually profitable cooperation. So developing production is one of the directions, but there are other areas of potential cooperation, like communications and transport. But I would also like to draw your attention on some specific projects on transport and communications. There are 4 projects. So a distributed energy project, which is being implemented here in the Republic, opens wide range of cooperation. Just let me. Another direction is
Компания цепочки создания ценностей аммиака между восточной Сибири
the company enhancing the transportation of ammonia from the natural gas produced by a company in the Irkutsk area and exporting into Japan. So now they are working on the feasibility plan. So it could be transported either by a pipeline or freight trucks. And also another channel is between Sakhalin and Japan. And in 2019, Rosatom and the Japanese Ministry on Energy signed an agreement on Russia's export of natural gas to Japan. Also, another project is the production of ethanol in Amur Oblast. And so there is a preliminary agreement which stipulates the export of methanol and transport. So this and the last project, this agreement was signed during the last Eastern Economic Forum. This is the production of transport freight cargo ships to transport methanol. So Russia and Japan are now discussing the possibility of producing special cargo ships for transporting methanol. So this is the initiative which has already started. So these are 4 specific projects Japan and Russia are working on already. So Japan and Russia have a huge potential on this ammonia and hydrogen industry. So, and another important project which is being implemented here in the Republic is the Tixi project. So the project on producing on wind energy. So this project was launched in the settlement of Tixi together with the Japanese company. So this project utilizes the wind power generation. So last December, I was at the opening of this wind farm, and I said then that the projects like that in Tixi are very significant because they enhance the living conditions of people living in Tixi. And also, this is the example, the power supply in this settlement means also the power and energy supply to the Northern Sea route. So this means that the way from Europe to Japan can become some 30–40% shorter than via the Suez Canal. So already some quantities of liquefied gas are exported via the Northern Sea route. And so the revival of, and also this project contributes to the development of renewable energy projects in the Far East. So we are already witnessing the positive examples of effective Japanese-Russian cooperation. And now we could also expand this energy project and expand our cooperation. In conclusion, I would like to say that now I'm witnessing the development of the Sakha Republic Yakutiy, led by Mr. Nikolaev, and I am really impressed. And I also see great potential for the development between Japan and the Republic Sakha Yakutiy. Thank you very much. Thank you, distinguished ambassador. Of course, the energy issues and climate change issues are closely related, and we need to review the energy policy of our countries. And yes, indeed, the green economy is topical, though Russia is famous for its carbohydrate techniques. And with our knowledge of the Arctic conditions, our results can benefit the whole world. And maybe the next Northern Sustainable Development Forum should be devoted to this topic, renewable energy. So I think the head will agree. So maybe it could be like a rehearsal to the World Energy Summit. So we need to deepen the cooperation between Japan and Russia in all directions. So the climate change issues and the risks, of course, require adequate legislation. And Russia is a member of the framework agreement, and it triggers a number of changes in the legislation. And here we have chair of the Russian Federation State Duma Committee on Regional Policy and Problems of the North, Mr. Nikolai Kharitonov. What is the legal framework created now for the climate regulation, and what issues are still need our attention?
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, уважаемые товарищи. Особый привет Якутии, Якутску, Арсену Сергеевичу Николаеву.
Yakutia and Yakutsk, and Arsen Nikolaev, the head of the Sakha Republic Yakutia, and the ambassador of Japan in Russia, Toyohisa Kozuki, whom I know from 1998 and whom I meet almost every year at the Far Eastern Economic Forum. Greetings to you. And first of all, I would like to greet you on behalf of the Committee of the State Duma on Regional Policy and Problems of the North and Far East. And within this forum, before this forum, there has been a parliamentary session where we talked about the legislation and conditions of climate change, and recommendations have been prepared that can become a framework for the work of the State Duma, of the next State Duma, the 8th one. And we think that we will discuss that even more later and work on it further. When we talk about climate regulation, we need to take into account our international agreements, and we are now in agreement that Russia is following them. For example, Russia being the party of the Framework Convention of the UN on climate change, and a country that has ratified the Kyoto Protocol, has decreased global carbon emissions for quite a lot. And it has reached up to 30%. And taking into account the forests and their carbon capture abilities, it's up to 50%. And within the frames of the Paris Agreement, Russia needs to decrease the emissions by 70% up to 2030, and this is a very large goal, and our country is actively working on this. As for the climate regulation in Arctic, we can talk about legislation in the field of technical regulation, environmental protection, industrial safety, and many others. I also want to say that among the national projects, the National Project Ecology is the one requiring the most resources, with a budget of over 4 trillion rubles. Within the session, we also looked at the federal law on limiting the emission of greenhouse emissions. And this is the next step of Russia following its international agreements. This law has the legal framework for collecting the necessary information from organizations on greenhouse emissions. There are new terms there and new property rights of carbon units. And this is necessary for us for the future to provide priority support for green projects in the Russian economy. We also looked closely at the economic part of the economy due to the introduction of carbon fines, carbon costs. This can actually lead to a number of risks, such as the risks to our exporting industries, such as oil and gas industry, the mineral industries and other industries, and the loss can be quite large, up to 5 to 6 billion euros a year, and we cannot allow this, of course. When we are looking at climate change in the international aspect, we need to take into account the fact that Russia is a global environmental donor of the world, and all our territory has 25% of all the global forests and 20% of all the fresh water, not even taking into account the circulation of fresh water. And at the last parliamentary session, we came to the conclusion that if we calculate everything objectively, we can increase the carbon capture reserve of forests up to 50 or 70%. And one of the ways to combat carbon emissions is the prevention of forest fires. And if we can do that, there's going to be a very different national balance for emissions and capture of carbon. That is why we are working to mutually recognize our methods for calculating the carbon emissions and carbon capture. And if these methods can be adopted, then we can reach mutual agreements. Dear colleagues, the Northern Forum, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary today, is the territory of international friendship and constructive dialogue. And that is why on this forum we need to say that the climate agenda is our mutual work, and it should not be used as an instrument of bad competition and protectionism. If we talk about permafrost and legislative regulations, we should also mention that Yakutia is the only region of Russia that has a special law on this in this sphere. The only region. It is a leading region and has 5 years of practice of using this law. The law which was adopted on the 22nd May 2018. And taking into account this experience, the regional deputies, they recommend to adopt a federal law on this issue. And I think that the discussions on this issue will continue in the next Duma. And we also talk about the need for creating the state system for monitoring of permafrost, and new federal laws and changes to existing federal laws need to be adopted for this. In the Soviet Union, Since 1989, there has been a special committee for studying permafrost, and 1938, the Permafrost Institute of Obruchev was established, and one of the scientists, Mikhail Emgin, one of the founders of permafrost science, was talking about the need for studying the permafrost. Even then, we understood that this issue was very topical, and I am confident that in the nearest time, all the necessary legislation for creating the state system of monitoring permafrost, we will create it. Dear colleagues, in conclusion, I would also like to underline that in accordance with the Constitution of Russia, the land and other natural resources are preserved as the basis for the life of people who live on these specific territories, and we have to provide the efficient use and protection for the unique natural resources of northern territories to increase the quality of life of our people, taking into account the possible negative effects of climate change and the needs for sustainable development of regional ecosystems. We, the deputies of the State Duma, support all the initiatives aimed at resolving these issues. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nikolai Kharitonov, for your report. And now we see that what kind of work is standing before the new State Duma, and we hope that the federal law on protecting permafrost will be adopted soon, and this will become the basis of all our hopes for good quality of life here. The government of the country, of course, pays a lot of attention to the sustainable development of the Far East, the Arctic, and the Northern Sea route, one of the strategic directions of the state policy of our country, about which the Mr. Ambassador talked, and this has a global significance for the national security of Russia. And the executor of the state policy of Russia in the Arctic is the Ministry for the Development of the Far East and Arctic. So how are the state programs and plans are being developed and realized? And we would like to ask Vitaly Simonenko, Vice President of the Corporation for the Development of the Far East and Arctic, to talk about it. Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be present at this forum, which is very significant not only for Russia, but also for the chairmanship of Russia in the Arctic Council. The government of the country pays a lot of attention to the sustainable development of the Arctic and the Northern Sea route, one of the strategic directions for the development of Russia, which has significance for the national security of Russia. Russia has over half of all the resources of the Arctic globally. And there are many deposits of diamonds, oil, gas, and so on. There is a unique community of northern people, very strong people who are adapted to harsh climate. And the main features of these people is their values, such as the bravery, reliance on each other and helping each other. 22 million Northerners they contribute greatly to the economy of Russia due to their initiative, to their hard work nature, and their optimism, providing over 10% of the national income. And strategically important documents have been adopted recently, such as the basis for the development of the Arctic up to 2030 and the strategy for the development of the Arctic and providing national security up to 2035. And a new integrated program for the development of the region has been adopted, aimed at attracting private investment, creating new workplaces, and developing the region. Many new laws that regulate the entrepreneurship businesses in the Arctic have been changed, due to which the Arctic has become a new economic zone with preferences which are very competitive. And the investments into the region are up to 277 billion rubles, which is up to $8.3 billion. 83% of all the residents of this zone are of small and medium enterprises. The total amount of investment in this region is 6.3 trillion rubles, and this is about 86 to 85 billion dollars. About 2 trillion rubles, which is about 27 billion US dollars, has already been invested, and over 400 companies are now working, and there are about 200,000 new workplaces, of which half are already existing at the moment. There are new territories for future development. There is discounted mortgage rates in the region as well, and many families used it already. There are new subsidized flights. There are events for supporting the traditional economies of the indigenous people, and there's also the program for the state support of the economies of the indigenous people of the Arctic. There is an implementation of a big program for providing free land to people in the far east of Russia and in the Arctic. Since the February of 2022, all the citizens of Russia can get free land in the Arctic, those who will participate in the voluntary migration to these lands. Ministry of Russia for the Development of the Far East and the Arctic is the locomotive of many new initiatives. There's going to be a new program of the Far Eastern and Arctic concessions, the PPP mechanism, which will allow the attraction of private capital into the infrastructure projects. The climate is changing in the world. Temperatures are rising, and precipitation as rain are increasing instead of the normal snow. The climate change in the Arctic has a very big importance for the people who live in this region and for any economic operations, be it sea operations, work on the shelf, or on the land. 70% of all the infrastructure in the Arctic is in the zone of potential risk for the melting of permafrost. That is why the first plenary session of this forum is aimed at discussing this issue. That is why it's very necessary for us to work in this region very carefully. And the design, reconstruction, and construction of new buildings, new infrastructure sites should be done using new technologies, including energy-efficient materials, taking into account the climate and the localities. As you know, the Russian Federation is also chairing the Arctic Economic Council, which supports the principles of ENG and the Arctic Investment Protocol, which Russian companies are planning to join. The work that we are doing together is aimed at creating a high quality of life for people in the Arctic, and that is why we need to develop infrastructure and create comfortable works for the life of people in the Arctic. And I want to say in conclusion that the results of this third Northern Forum are going to meet the expectations of its organizers, its guests, and its participants, and will lead to many new business contacts, exchange of experience on many levels. I wish you all good luck. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Виталий Евгеньевич. Да, мы тоже очень надеемся, что в рамках Северного
Thank you very much, and we also do hope that during this Sustainable Development Forum we are going to come up with some specific proposals and solutions beneficial for the Russian Far East and the Arctic and the international Arctic. And of course, we're all sure that in the coming 10 years, the Arctic will see comfortable living conditions for the local people and people who come to work there. The vulnerability and the long revival of fragile ecosystems in the region call for solutions by the environmentalists, and the Arctic Council once adopted a resolution on supporting the international scientific community. So that's why a lot of attention is paid to thorough investigation. So that's why I am addressing Valery Kryukov, academician of the Russian Academy of Science, who is going to talk about the new reality. Good evening, distinguished head of the Republic, dear participants, and I'm grateful for giving this opportunity to the academic circles to talk about here. And this is my third participation in the Northern Sustainable Development Forum. So myself and Mr. Zhelezniak are representing the Russian Academy of Sciences. Unfortunately, Mr. Melnikov is not with us. He is one of the most prominent permafrost researchers. And I would like to talk about the tasks in front of the economic science and what kind of understanding we all should have to solve the climate change agenda, which are very pressing and urgent. So we need to start solving them immediately. The sustainable development for the Russian economics and international economics. I am a member of the Polar Academy of Norway. I have been working with Norwegian colleagues for 30 years, and I've been to Alaska, Canada, and many countries of the world, like Alexander Pilyasov, who is present here. And we know very well what are the problems facing our colleagues. In the previous years, sustainable development was understood as the solution maintaining just the adequate living conditions and the operation of technological infrastructure. Yes, it is still topical and relevant, but the new reality is that with these carbon emissions and methanol emissions, methane emissions, they influence a lot of factors which determine the stability, and one of them is permafrost. So we used to perceive permafrost as some obstacle and something which causes problems and destabilizes the production processes and systems. And now we need to review our perception of permafrost and view it as something which determines what we want. It's an asset, and we need to change our views on certain questions. For example, distinguished Mr. Ambassador told us that we have this, the projects now are prolonged. They are like networks and chains. So the Siberian branch is working a lot on spatial cooperation. For example, this Irkutsk oil processing company. Remember, last March we were with the president of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and we discussed these issues with the top management of the Republic. And in last June we discussed these issues with Irkutsk oil processing company. So the Siberian branch is involved into these production processes. So this is a wide range of challenges which needs some scientific and also some civil understanding. So we need to implement the practices and understanding of the environment and the understanding of the indigenous people which have been living here for thousands of years. And their major advantage is flexibility and the ability to adapt to the environment and be in harmony with nature while solving some economical tasks. So it's not only about the precise devices, measuring devices, but this must be some ability to feel and to foresee the changes to come. And the indigenous peoples are capable of this. And so this indigenous knowledge is another asset which must be accounted for, and we must think about it when we implement certain ideas and approaches implemented here. And the economists of the Siberian branch are ready to do that. I like coming here because I have many friends and colleagues here, and we are all facing serious challenges, and we are ready to solve them. And I wish all of us success.
Thank
you, Mr. Kryukov. Indeed, no, we should think not only about technology, about economy. We must think about people, how we are to change and adapt to the coming changes, and how to educate our younger generations with the same ideas so that they will soon take over the responsibility for the future of the Arctic and the world. And about
использование современных достижений науки и технологий для предупреждения борьбы с бедствиями, говорил в свое время глава китайского метеорологического управления господин Синдахе. Он с нами.
Mr. Sindahe talked about this responsibility a lot, about the climate change, and we are all aware of the dynamic changes in the People's Republic of China, about the achievements in various fields. And so I would like to ask Mr. Tsin how we can maintain the balance between the natural, economic, and social environments. Please, Mr. Tsin, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Perfect question for me. Very simple, because the man-made climate change is the most important reason. So we must reduce the greenhouse gases emission and protect our Earth, particularly for the cryosphere and permafrost. Before my talking, I would like to introduce my colleague Jin Huijun. He's on the screen. Hello, Jin. Jin Huijun is my colleague for many years. He got his university thesis in the University of Geology. And after geology, he worked in Chinese Academy of Sciences for many years. During this period, he been to America, Canada, and Russia to make the cooperation in the research work for the permafrost and the engineering. And during the past years, after I think it's 3 or 4 years ago, she shifted to the university as the visitor professor for the cryosphere science and the permafrost. And I wish he will join this forum to make a contribution from Chinese science. Ladies and gentlemen, so it's my pleasure to be invited to join this meeting. At present, the global climate change and its risks have become a major common challenge for all countries in the world, which must tackle it through close cooperation. The cryosphere is one of the 5 major spheres of the climate system. It plays an important role of the Earth system with its huge freshwater reserve, later heat and of phase transition, greenhouse gases, and the unique species and culture structures. Now I would like to show some view of the climate change and the crossover. First of all, we need to gain the deep understanding of climate change and its risk, and as well as the climate system change science. The latest finding show the global climate system consists of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, lithosphere, and the biosphere. It's warming up to bring about wide and profound impact on the nature, ecosystem, and the human society. Recently, in the past 2 years, the IPCC AR6 issued the 3 special reports and the Working Group 1 report. In the AR5, in the AR6, they issued the issues, which is to say some cryosphere compounds, such as mountain glacier, sea ice, sheets, and permafrost, are quite sensitive to global warming. Working Group 1 report stated that further warming will imply permafrost, so the lost seasonal snow cover, melting of the glaciers and the ice sheets, and the lost summer Arctic sea ice. Is very high confidence they will be ice-free seasonal of the even finishing by the mid to end of this century. Meteor shortage will be the huge disaster to the people of the many mountain regions. Ice sheet change is irreversible, and its extreme change, so-called low likelihood and high impacts, cannot be excluded. The extreme change of ice sheets must result to in the very very high sea level in the mid-central scales. What's the reason? We think the human activities are the main cause of the climate warming and the fast cross-spheric change. Without the mitigation in greenhouse gases emission, the global climate system will warm up further, which lead to the loss resilience of the Earth system and the unstable state of the hot house Earth to increase the climate risk to the global natural ecosystem and the human society. Excuse me. Or even weaken destruction within. Therefore, to achieve the objective, the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade per above pre-industry levels by the end of the century, and pursue short efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industry levels. There is the supply. There is a need for major changes to come about in the energy supply and other sectors. So that they can impact the early as early as possible on the long-term global emission reduction path and the system and the cross-sectors strategy for this purpose. In the conclusion, we think the people facing the severe challenge of the global warming and the fast atmospheric change, human must work close regional to deal with it. To do so, we must improve our scientific understanding of the climate change and its risk process cooperation among the countries, regions, and the enterprise to speed up the green and low carbon development. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Да, спасибо большое.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsindahe. Indeed, we need to develop international scientific cooperation very quickly, despite the restrictions due to the pandemic, when we cannot meet each other face to face, when we cannot do joint field research. But I am sure that the scientists from various countries, they know how to arrange this cooperation under new conditions. We are still to evaluate the effect of the pandemic on economy and how can we overcome these serious consequences. Of course, there must be an international monitoring network deployed, and Mr. Putin talked about the international networks, and I hope that our scientists will be able to do that. And Russia has become chair of the in the Arctic Council, and the chair of the Northern Forum is Lapland. So what is Santa Claus's forecast? So let's ask our new chair, the governor of Lapland, Mr. Mika Riipi. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. And dear participants, it's a great honor to be here and participate and talk about a very important issue, sustainable development and the measures that we have to take into account when facing the climate change. Climate change is also here in Lapland and affecting very much. As you might know, over the half of Lapland's area is located above the Arctic Circle. But still our climate is much more warmer than in other parts of Arctic in same parallel. Reason is, of course, the Gulf Stream and North Atlantic Drift, which warms our climate quite much. And that's the reason why here in Lapland there's permafrost areas only in the northern part of Lapland in very small scale. So the permafrost area is not our biggest objective. From a climate point of view, the average temperature of Lapland has risen approximately 2 Celsius degrees compared to pre-industrial times, and the warming development has accelerated in last 10 years quite a lot. Here in Lapland, we can see the consequences of climate change in 3 ways or 3 dimensions. Summers get more and more warmer. Then secondly, the snowy time of winter decreases. And thirdly, the average amount of raining rises very much. And these phenomena affect already in Lapland many ways. First, the summers getting warmer means that the risks of, for example, forest fires has been increased. And of course, the flora and fauna is changing quite rapidly. Many Arctic species, like, for example, Arctic fox, are getting very rare nowadays. The situation with forest fires in Lapland is not so big threat than it is in the other parts of Arctic. We all saw the situation in Yakutsk last summer, and it's a way bigger challenge there. We have here a very good and comprehensive road network in Lapland, but still it's a big risk, especially to forestry and private landowners. The decrease of snowy time in winter affects straight to our livelihoods here in Lapland. Traditional reindeer herding has difficulties because the ground freezes before snow and reindeers can dig their food under the ice. Similar thing is with the winter tourism. The season suffers from instability and, for example, effective time of a forest harvesting decreases. And of course, this development has a numerous effect to Arctic biodiversity. Rise of average amount of raining has already shown that although the snowy time in winter decreases here in Lapland, but the total amount of snow can even grow. And that means that snowstorms and unstable weather conditions become more common. And especially here in the Lapland, the flooding risk grows very high. For example, our capital city of Rovaniemi is categorized in a second highest level risk of flooding in whole Finland. So yes, we see the effects of climate change here in Lapland. But I think that the most important question is what can we do in a regional or municipal level to this situation? In our regional strategy, we've divided our measures into two categories: to avoid and to adapt. The background of our measures comes, of course, from the European Union's ambitious Green Deal policy, which allocates billions of euros in the coming next years to tackle climate change challenges. Almost all of the current funding mechanisms and instruments are linked to Green Deal goals in a regional and interregional level. From that perspective, we have been preparing here in Lapland this year our own regional avoid and adapt strategy, and we call it actually Lapland's own Green Deal. In the avoid category, there are numerous measures that we intend to do in order to decrease our regional carbon emissions. As a few examples, I can pick the goal to link all our municipalities into carbon neutral municipality network. Secondly, we tend to increase the amount of electric charging stations network in Lapland's roads and add research and innovation resources into more biodiversity-friendly harvesting methods in our forests. In adapt category, there are measures like developing the harvesting machines capability to work in defrost forests, increase the electrification capabilities in our big industry like mining and metallurgy, and of course developing new technological innovations into, for example, reindeer herding in the changing circumstances. So, ladies and gentlemen, I personally think that there are a lot of things to do in the regional and local level in order to avoid and adapt the climate change. I believe that especially here in the Arctic, where the consequences of the climate change are the biggest, the local level has the best ability and know how to innovate new ways, adopt and minimize effects. What is very important is that we don't develop things alone. We don't do things by ourselves only. Collaboration between Arctic regions and cities becomes in a high value in the future. Joining our know-how, research resources, and expertise on innovations, we can fight the climate change and its affections much more effectively. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, уважаемый председатель.
Thank you, distinguished chair. Of course, here in Yakutia, we also witness shorter winters. So if there are no winters more in Lapland, maybe Santa Claus can move here to Yakutia. Well, hopefully it won't happen, but we certainly have a lot to learn from Lapland, which have created most recognizable brands in the world. And I hope that we are going to have very successful inter-regional cooperation. So Mr. Litkov is here with us, a member of the Federation Council Committee on Federal Structure, Regional Policy, Local Government and Northern Affairs. And Mr. Litkov is also the chair of the Association of Indigenous Peoples of the Russian Far East and Arctic, a permanent member of the Arctic Council. And when we are talking about changes in future, centuries-long knowledge of indigenous people should be taken into account. So we must use this ancient experience. So I would like to ask Mr. Litkov to tell us about how the traditional lifestyle of indigenous people is changing, what they think about the changes, and what is their advice. Thank you very much. I would like to greet everyone on behalf of the All-Russian Association of Indigenous Peoples of the Far East Siberia. I'm greeting all of you. You know that the topic of today's plenary session, the sustainable development of the Arctic economy and environment, is very relevant, and this is a timely issue. And we are glad that these issues are discussed at the Northern Sustainable Development Forum. We think that we live in the Arctic, it's our home, and we know the history and we know the current situation here. We are also familiar with the international practices of our colleagues and our peers in the Arctic Council, and we know how indigenous people live elsewhere in the world. So the fact is that the changes are here, and scientists have been monitoring them for many years. But this link between science and economy and environment is obvious, and everyone, like businesses and scientists and governments, they should take account the climate change, and they must think. We need to develop new technologies, and we must understand that the construction of social and industrial infrastructure is to be changed, and it will change if the permafrost degrades. And if we have earlier navigation season or later formation of ice, this means additional risks, but on the other hand, some opportunities for navigation, not only the Northern Sea route, but also along our smaller rivers, which will help the economy. So these climatic changes are to be accounted for in all spheres of our life. And here science is to develop new instruments, new methods, new techniques, and methods of monitoring and warning, and new technologies of construction. And also science, along with industrial companies, should make sure that all major industrial facilities in the Arctic, they influence the environment, like construction of big ports or development of deposits. They change the landscape, and also the increased population will also influence the environment. So we must have a balanced policy. And here the interaction and exchange of ideas between the countries of the world are vital. So talking about indigenous peoples themselves, our elders and us, we all live in the Arctic, and all these changes affect our lives, and we need to acquire new skills, and we must understand that, for example, the quality of ice cover, and in winter, especially for nomads who migrate for long distances, during their seasonal migrations, the quality of the ice cover is critical. So it can cause some economic damage and losses. And so we are already witnessing it, and some people adapt to it, so they use new navigational techniques. Well, the internet, the access is not that wide, but we have better coverage with mobile communication, satellite communication, and it changes again the interaction between countries, between governments and people. So living in the Arctic is becoming far more dynamic, and along with our society, our academic community and governments find ways to adapt to the changing reality. So we cannot say that the climate change has changed our lives tremendously. It's not true. Because nature is mild, and its effect is usually mild. Yes, we have we see some changes in the volume of precipitation, in the directions and strength of winds. But it is getting warm a little bit. The climate change is not sudden and abrupt, and we are still involved in our traditional economic activities. And the climate change hasn't changed that much. We are still involved in reindeer husbandry, in fishing and hunting. And our major concern now is the protection of the environment, and we hope that even under the industrial exploration of the Arctic, along with businesses and scientists, we will be able to maintain our reindeer, our pastures for our reindeers to graze on, to maintain migration routes. And what is also quite special about Russia is that today we are in the 21st century and we are talking about new economy, new ecology, about climate change, and we are talking about some social changes. But anyway, in the 21st century, Russia have preserved probably the last area of traditional nomadic reindeer husbandry. So people still use the same migration routes their ancestors used like centuries ago. So they have preserved their languages, their traditional transportation means, their clothes, their first language. So because the traditional lifestyle helps to keep the ethnic identity of people, and we are proud that we here in Russia we have managed to preserve traditional lifestyle. It's not some like museum exhibits. We are not like museum exhibits, and we want to enter the 21st century economy anyway, and there are many changes in the legislation now, and we participate in drafting and adopting these legal acts. So yes, there are many risks, and we need more documents, laws, and acts to preserve this traditional lifestyle. But the fact that we are still living by our centuries-long traditions, and we are ready to produce traditional foods, healthy and beneficial for your health, and integrating the experience of our foreign colleagues, learning lessons from our mistakes and from others' mistakes. We need to learn these lessons quickly, and we must prevent some serious damage from industrial exploration, and we also need to look at the potential risks of the climate change, and with and exchanging and joining our efforts, we can save our beautiful Arctic, and together, not only the Arctic regions, but also southern Siberia and Far East, we are working together. So this is like a short summary of what is being done. Thank you, Mr. Litkov. We understand that the rich experience of indigenous peoples can be used in the everyday life of everyone living in the Arctic, and we should use the experience. But at the same time, we need to use modern technologies to improve their living conditions. And now in Russia and here in the Republic of Yakutia, reindeer herders have also preserved their traditional reindeer husbandry, and many countries of the world admire this, and they actually ask to preserve this industry in its traditional states. But the humankind is changing, and we are having more and more new technologies introduced into our life, and the life is changing as the planet. Today we have here Italian ultramarathon runner Paolo Venturini, who did something impossible for the human body, having covered 75 kilometers at +65 and running almost 40 kilometers here in Yakutia at -40-something degrees. So he has run such marathons in different parts of the world, and he knows how the climate is changing in the world on different continents. So, Paolo, please share your impressions, and please tell us about what you think about the North and the Arctic.
Ladies and gentlemen, authorities and friends, dobre veče, good afternoon. Today I am honored and proud to be here with you, and for this I want to thank the Board of Northern Forum and the government of the Republic of Sakha-Yakutia for inviting me. Thank you very much. After 2 years, I return in this wonderful land, which have given me unforgettable emotions. I won't make a premise. I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a meteorologist, and I'm not a scientist. So for this, I want to move the level of discussion in an easy level, because I think we need to work together and involve more people, if it's possible, especially for the younger generations. I'm only a simple athlete who, from the age of 7 years old to today, has always confronted with the stopwatch of the opponents and with my limits, questioning myself in search of new goals. Goals which have led me all over the planet to measure myself with Mother Nature, with her strengths and her power. Today I'm here because many people say that I am the athlete or the man who holds the record to have run and tried the largest temperature range in the world, and to have run in the most extreme places in this planet. I don't know, but I can say that in over 40 years of athletic career, I have been lucky enough to have seen some of the most spectacular and unique places on the planet. I just remember the last two, my experience. In 2017 in Iran, in the Lut Desert, the place where the highest temperature on the planet were recorded. I ran 75 kilometers with the temperature of plus 67 degrees Celsius. Performance never done before by a human being. Here, some scientists have studied the effects of extreme dehydration on the human body. And then the last one was January 20, 2019, here in the Republic of Sakha, in the place called the Pole of Cold, the coldest inhabited place on the planet. I ran 39 kilometers from the village of Tomtor to Oymyakon, with a temperature of minus 52.6 degrees Celsius, a record that even the science before the day believed to be impossible. My performance have always had the climate as the protagonist, and for this reason, I have always made myself available for the science, to better understand its effect on human life, having the reactions of my body monitored by experts, applying research protocols. Data collected in extreme conditions, useful for science and to be better understand the effects of climate on everyday life. Studies of hydration, hypoxia, and altitude sickness on the effect of low temperatures of the respiratory system on energy consumption or on the neurological reaction of the brain of extreme condition. Days, months, and years of training and preparation, but particular of study the natural environment, the climate, and the human body, where my mantra is always, man has not yet discovered his limits, I am constantly looking for mine. The world is constantly changing, and the science has managed to discover and answer many questions. Climate change, for example. We know a lot, but still not enough to understand the risk of dangers. The big question is, but if man has not yet discovered his limits, how can he know those of Mother Nature? In the last century, the pressures of humanity on the planet has reached its limit. But paradoxically, the less inhabited and most remote areas of the planet are those where the most extreme climate change are noted. Now, when I ask the meteorologist to help me plan a challenge, it is increasingly difficult to get help from the statistics to have forecast because the climate has really changed. Just think of the Arctic regions or the example of the cold of Pole here in the Republic of Sakha. It was 1924 when in Oymyakon and Tomtor, minus 71.2 degrees Celsius was recording. And more or less it was like this in every winter. In 2019, when I made my performance, we wanted to make a record with the lowest temperature. In reality, it was like that, minus 52.6, which was one of the lowest temperatures of 2019, but very far from minus 70 of 1924. I think that by continuing like this, perhaps my cold record will remain undefeated for many centuries, while the hottest records, if anyone wants to try, can be improved, as temperature will be higher and higher. As an athlete and man and a policeman, and now like a goodwill ambassador for the Northern Forum, I feel the duty to tell all this, in particular to the new generations, the only ones who is made ever aware of the risk that all humanity is running, can and will limit the damage. Yes, because in reality the damage that man inflicts on the planet is the damage that he inflicts of himself. Climate change is making the world an increasingly dangerous place. During my career in police, I wanted to deepen and learn more about the force of nature. Taking advantage of my sport training, I specialize myself in mountain rescue, sea and river rescue technique. Even if I use modern equipment with innovative technologies, facing the verticality of mountain wall or swimming in the cold water against the force of river, when you try to rescue people in danger, make you understand how fragile and insignificant human life is when the greatness of nature is not respected. High temperature, thaws, hurricanes, storms, virus and pandemic are much more dangerous for human than for nature. Mine want to be a provocation. It is clear nature suffers, and that we have already lost many animals and plant species. In my view, when we don't have answer to our questions, it is nature itself then we can find them. I give a couple of examples. When a lizard is attacked by a predator, to defend itself, it amputates its tail, forever abandoning a precious part of its body, but it does so to save its life. Equally, the human body, when it is at risk of freezing, here in Yakutsk you are the best expert in the world of cold medicine. It sends and concentrates the blood to the internal vital organs, trying to keep them warm to survive, compromising the peripheral parts, such as fingers, hands, or feet. The planet responds in much the same way. When a lake dried up, in that place much of the flora and fauna are lost forever. But in another place, the rainfall increases, favoring other species. The melting of the Arctic ice put the life and balance of the regions involved at the risk, sacrificing the animals of the Arctic or making them migrate. But in other distant places, the sea level will rise, making room for other beings. Who will conquer other territories? I mean that in this climate war, unfortunately, there will many innocent victims. I am referring to flora and fauna. The losses are irrecoverable forever. Man, the most evolved being in the planet, will have a more complicated existence every day, with the risk of disappearing forever. But she, the nature, and the planet will continue, even without us, thanks to the resilience, to the ability to regenerate over time, capable of generating life. The answers are always in the nature. The disappearance of dinosaurs teaches us how history could repeat itself. There are those who disappear, and there are those who are reborn. The great key to understanding is precisely in the time. In just 100 years, man has been able to change the climate balance that normally occurred over many centuries. But how many human lives go to be for 100 years? Today, only the life of 1 or 2 people. Nothing compared to the evolution of the planet. There is still little time left to spread the culture of respect for nature in young people. But at the same time, we must take advantage of the time left to involve all the people who sometimes do not see or do not want to see what is happening. Sport has taught me that it is necessary to plan and prepare to get to the final result. Always respecting the rules, simple rules, like respecting your body, respect the opponent, respect and protect nature. In conclusion, I believe that there are many ways to try to improve the situation, even throughout those that sometimes seem to have nothing to do with the climate change. As in my case, the way of sport, a phenomenal education system, which young people and the public opinion can be reached more easily. The curiosity of those who cannot see can be awakened by inviting them to contribute and collaborate all together for the same cause. Today, my message is addressed to you so that you can consider exporting my point of view, creating projects that then can involve everyone, even in small daily gestures, so as to lead to cessation of this war between man and climate, training young people, which can become a force for peace between man and nature. Long life to the Northern Forum. Long life to the Republic of Sakha-Yakutia. Long life to our planet.
Спасибо большое, Паула.
Thank you, Paula, very much for your showing almost unlimited possibilities of human body. And if we all practice sports, maybe we will be able to endure all the climate changes which we are to face.
Но тем не менее вы абсолютно правы.
But you are
Планета без
absolutely
человечества
right
спокойно
that
может себя
the planet
восстановить и
can
существовать.
revive without human beings, but we live here together and we are capable of changing ourselves, of bringing up a new generation of people which will care about the environment and our planet. And we have the last speaker, the co-organizer of our this year's forum, who is a specialist in the field, who is going to talk about what is permafrost, how we should study permafrost. Please welcome Mikhail Zhelezniak, director of the only Permafrost Institute. Distinguished Mr. Nikolaev, dear colleagues, I am very glad that the Northern Sustainable Development Forum is taking place in Yakutsk again, because during this forum you meet most interesting people. And I'm particularly glad that this year's forum is devoted to the climate change and to permafrost, to the issue which I have been studying for some 50 years. And today, engineers and scientists, they understand how to construct on permafrost, how to live on permafrost. But there is another problem, which is discussed here. So we see the rising temperature, and we have the exchange balance. So, and we see how the permafrost is changing. Actually, permafrost is not permanent. And when they invented this term, so actually permafrost means like century-long thickness. So, for example, here on the territory of Yakutia, permafrost ages like some 2 million years. For example, in the north, in the Kolyma area, we have blocks of permafrost which haven't melted for millions of years. But in the recent 10 years, or maybe even later, we have changed our paradigm significantly. So the permafrost studies started in 1927 when Mikhail Sumgin published his book, Soil Permafrost in the Soviet Union. So this book formulated the subject of research and the basic terminology. And in this textbook is still used. And when we were used to struggling permafrost and to fighting permafrost, but now we understand that we needn't struggle with permafrost. We need to get adapted to the way it functions. And for example, people came across some icy layers during construction of Baikal-Amur railway. So we started to build various engineering constructions to freeze the ground. And our task now is, when constructing certain facilities, we must understand that it will change the environment. And we need to choose such solutions and to make such surveys to make sure that this facility, during its like 50-60 years life cycle, will remain in the adequate ground conditions. And if it is impossible, we need to see what industrial additional engineering constructions are to be introduced and invest in them. So we were talking about that the air temperature in Russia and globally has risen over the past 50 years, starting from 1.2 degrees to 4 degrees. And surprisingly, the climatic changes are most visible in the Arctic, but here in the city of Yakutsk. So it can be some technogenic factor. So central Yakutia is the area where the annual air temperatures have been the most, and the temperature rose by 4.2 degrees. So how the soil temperatures are changing, and how the active layer is changing. So it doesn't change in the same way as the air temperature changes. So if don't think that if the air temperature rises, then the soil temperature is going to rise as well. No, it doesn't work this way. So the nature is something like great phenomenon. And yes, this Chatelier-Brown principle, when we change something, other factors, they adapt to these changes. So if we see this reaction, we can take certain measures, or we must avoid certain approaches. So if we even stop constructing on permafrost, we still have existing engineering facilities and constructions, and then we will need to find solutions for maintaining them. So the approaches which are available now, they actually allow us responding to these problems. And the first step to live comfortably and I mean with being able to solve these problems, we have deformation of buildings and degradation of roads, and we see the development of cryogenic processes, which are not local, but they occupy quite huge territories. But there are solutions. And the first step, so many people talked about it these days, but I would like to tell again. So we need the monitoring system, the system of controlling. What is going on with the natural environment? So now we know that we need to measure temperature, but it probably won't help us to forecast the condition of permafrost. So we need to develop the system of control, so that in natural environment we need to monitor the changes in soil. And I know that in 2020 the Ministry on the Development of Forest did a tremendous job. So they have the project on monitoring the Kryolita zone. So they concentrated all permafrost scientists, some 100 people, over 100 people who worked on this document. So they calculated and estimated what is going to happen with our engineering constructions, what are the trends in permafrost condition. So what is going in the Russian Arctic, and the figures and the numbers, they are very serious. So the estimate is 5.7 trillion rubles if the rate of the engineering facilities degradation remains. So we estimated various scenarios, and but the general trend is warming. So if we understand the rate of the changes, we will be able to develop the system of measures, and we will learn the right places for construction. So
происходит, и поэтому вот имея системы контроля,
So with the monitoring system and knowing the trends in the climate change, we will
природа очень сложна.
come to the right engineering solutions.
Которые есть в нормативных документах, это в большей части теоретические моменты.
So what is reflected in some regulating documents, these are basically like they are based on some theoretical conclusions, but we still need some actual data.
Ведутся наблюдения.
For example, the weather station here in Yakutsk have been monitoring the air temperature change for 7-8 years, but they haven't come to some, they haven't found any balance or any like viable results. So I'm very glad and I'm grateful to our parliament that they managed to design the law on permafrost. So it was initiated back in 2014, and back then I didn't believe that it's going to turn into a legal document, but we managed to finalize this document, and now this document is being reviewed on the federal level. So it should become a legislative law which governs the permafrost management in Russia. So science is working on some like smart materials which can conduct heat in winter and can insulate heat in summer. And also we have some serious problems. And one of my concerns is Alazia. So it's where we have greater floodings and we have the water level rising. So and people have water in their cellars and their homes. So the life is changing greatly there. And permafrost and nature are going to come up with more surprises, but we will be living under changing climate and under changing conditions. We need to learn to forecast, to understand them, and to live and to get together and discuss and make decisions. And I'm sure that our community will find solutions for any challenges. And I do believe that the Northern Forum, Sustainable Development Forum, gives us some certainty and inspires us for the productive work. I'm very glad that I have a colleague from Japan who also crossed Greenland on sledges, who crossed the Sahara Desert. And so I wish you health and the solution of all our problems. Thank you, Mr. Железняк. It's 10 o'clock sharp. And so we are under our schedule. I would like Mr. Nikolaev to summarize our today's meeting. Dear participants of today's plenary session, so thank you for surviving till 10 o'clock in the evening. But it was interesting. It's been interesting, so no one left. We had a very interesting presentation covering a wide range of Arctic issues, starting from the development of indigenous languages to global warming and preservation of permafrost, I think that today's discussion again demonstrated that the platforms like the Northern Sustainable Development Forum are absolutely necessary, and experts from different countries must get together to discuss very vital problems. And yesterday, making my speech on the day of the Republic's statehood, told that in general, the humankind takes too much from nature, and we don't give anything back. And as Mr. Zhelezniak mentioned, if you take something from nature, it fills it, and then we have floods and we have fires, and then we get surprised why it is happening. So the Northern Sustainable Development Forum taking place here, where people have been living in harmony with nature for centuries, must become a platform for solutions which could be later extrapolated to other regions. And at the various sessions of the forum, we are going to discuss all the issues in the view of the harmony between nature and human beings. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Let's thank all of the speakers for most interesting presentations. Let's give a round of applause. And we are grateful to our interpreters who have worked here and made everything said understandable. So this is the end of our sessions, and I wish you fruitful work in the coming 2 days.